Hi, you're listening to Founder FM, Voice of the Entrepreneur. My name's Graham Brown. If you listen to mainstream media, you could be forgiven for thinking that there's only one way to become an entrepreneur in this age. Go to Stanford, study engineering, and raise $50 million for your first startup. It's the kind of story typified by the Mark Zuckerbergs of this world, and we're very familiar with it. But what about the real entrepreneurs? I'm talking about the guys who take risks. Going to Stanford and walking out into a seed round isn't that risky. It's often a path laid out for the modern startup entrepreneur. My next guest on Founder FM, however, took real risks. He turned his back on a career selling bonds in Wall Street to start his own business. His business wasn't a world-changing mobile app either. It was a car wash business. One thing led to another, and he found himself in the middle of a telecoms boom in the mid-90s. He grew and then eventually sold Delegation systems for $10 million. So many entrepreneurs dream of selling their business, but few ever do. Sure, it's a lot easier when you're ex-Harvard or ex-Stanford, but Rick Day was none of these. In this interview, he recalls the time when his father quit the family and left them to raise themselves. As a teen, he stood at the back of the lunch queue, his family scraping by on welfare. Rick's $10 million exit is even more remarkable in the context of his humble beginnings. Without privileged or its associated network of contacts, growing and exiting a business is very hard. But very hard does not mean impossible. And Rick's interview shows us how it is possible. Belief and a lot of hard graft.
Founder FM. You're listening to Founder FM with your host, Graham Brown.
Hello and welcome to Founder FM. My name's Graham Brown. Today we're going to head to San Diego to meet Rick Day, entrepreneur since, college days, his first car wash and the journey to selling a business for over $10 million. We're going to talk about building a business, selling a business, and advice for entrepreneurs today. Rick Day, welcome to the show.
Hey, Graham, thanks for having me. It's wonderful to talk with you.
Well, I'm really looking forward to finding out more about your story, Rick, as are the listeners, because it's been a really interesting arc from where you started to some of the challenges that you faced, to selling your business, to what you're involved in now. But let's sort of talk about where you started with your first couple of ventures. You got your start in telecoms. But I know before that, there's also a car wash that we've got to talk about. So I'm interested to know about your entrepreneurial background. Were you always an entrepreneur? Were you an entrepreneur like a young kid? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, it's a good question. No, I don't think I ever was. I think I was always sort of raised with the idea that you get a good education and you go and apply for jobs, and if you're lucky, somebody will hire you and you do that job, and then you work for someone, and that's what I watched my parents do, and that's really the foundation. That's where I started. But when I got I joined the Navy after a year of college here in the U.S. And after I got out of the Navy, I knew that I needed to go back to college and go to, get my college degree. And in that process, I met a classmate. I picked up a typical job when I was working my way through college and paying for it myself. And so, but one of my classmates told me that he had his own company. And I was very curious about this. How does a college guy have his own company? And it really turned out just to be, he was washing cars. He had an auto detailing company was what he talked about. But what struck me about that, Graham, was the seriousness that he had about this business. And he treated, instead of just saying, yeah, I wash some cars and I make some money, he had an auto detailing business, and it was an automotive cosmetic company was the way he put it. And I thought, wow. So, and the guy's name was Larry. He really taught me a lot about the whole spirit of, you can work for yourself, but you have to take it seriously.
So here you were at the time building your future, thinking about going to college, getting some kind of qualifications, getting a proper job, quote unquote, getting a career. And then this guy walks into your life by accident at this class and shows you a whole new world. How did you sort of reconcile with all of that? Because, you've been sort of pointed in this direction by your parents and everybody around you. And then this guy saying, hey, look, have a look over here.
Yeah, it was great. It was interesting. I was getting my degree in finance at San Diego State University, and I knew that I liked people. So I thought, well, maybe if I can combine some sales capabilities that I think I have with finance, then ultimately I'll get my degree and I'll go to Wall Street and I'll sell stocks and bonds and become
Right.
one of those big investment bankers. And this guy says, oh no, he showed me what he was doing, and I went, hey, I think I can do that.
Huh.
And honestly, even though I went to 26 million with Daycom, the scariest moment of my entrepreneurial life was when I took that leap from working for someone else and saying, I think I can do this on my own. I think I can go find customers. I think I can take care of those customers. I can do my billing. I can manage my cash. And I jumped out on my own. And I thought, well, the worst case is I can always go get another job again.
What was scary about that for you?
Well, I think just the idea that there wasn't an employer to fall back on. There was nobody to look over my shoulder and say, you have to be at work tomorrow at 9 a.m. It was sort of like, the sky's the limit and there's no safety net. And if you don't show up to work, you don't get paid. And I was in charge of all of that. So it was quite a transition.
That was more attractive to you than going to Wall Street and doing billion-dollar deals with bonds and stocks?
Well, I think, when you set a path and you head off in a direction, opportunities present themselves. And then you have to decide, am I going to stick to my path or am I going to pay attention to this opportunity? And this opportunity for me was a way for me to work my way through college and for me to make good grades and go to class when I wanted to go to class and to work when I wanted to work and to be able to support myself along the way. And so I just looked at this opportunity, and that's really that's when the entrepreneurial bug bit me.
Right. I want to talk about your journey with Daycom Systems as well. But throughout this time, as being an entrepreneur starting out, you're still a young entrepreneur. You don't have a big history in business. I'm
Right.
curious to know how you sort of dealt with the doubts, whether they're doubts that you had personally or people around you, because I imagine if people around you weren't entrepreneurs, in your upbringing, then they kind of look at your path and say, Rick, what are you doing? Why aren't you going to Wall Street and doing this? Why are you choosing this path, even though you believe in it? It's not the right thing to do, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. As those kind of conversations came up in your early days?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I decided that I was going to start my detailing company and sort of copy Larry's idea, which is a very important entrepreneurial piece of advice, by the way. You don't have to invent everything, right? If you see a good idea and you can copy it and you can expand on it, that's a great way to get started. But that aside, when I left the company that I was working for, while I was also going to college, a couple of the guys just laughed and they said, you're going to go wash cars and that's how you're going to get through college. And they even said, you'll be back next week or you'll be back in 2 weeks when you run out of money.
Right.
And so, yeah, of course. And thankfully for me, I had a grandmother that looked at me and said, I think you can do it. I think you have the drive. I think that you have the discipline. You have the military experience. And so, Rick, I think you should take this chance because you can always go get that job again.
Did the guys that sneered and laughed when you said you were going to become, self-employed and start your own business, did that impact you in a positive way long term? Did it sort of give you the energy to prove these guys wrong?
Oh, I think that's a common theme with entrepreneurs. When somebody says that you won't be able to do it, part of what drives you is, yes, I will, and I'll prove you wrong.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that absolutely had a piece of it.
Okay, well, let's talk about building Daycom Systems, because this is a business that you started out without grand designs, really. It's, you were selling parts, telecoms parts from a rented back room back in 1992. What's the story there? How did you get your start? And tell us a little bit about the growth of the business.
Well, okay, so it's a funny story. Actually, through my auto detailing business, I started detailing cars for this computer company that my banker told me about. And so I went down to this computer company every Friday and I was washing the Porsches and the Ferrari and the Corvettes and the Toyota Supras and, the Jags and nice cars. And they said, what are you going to do when you get done with college? And I said, well, I'm going to get my degree in finance and I'm going to go to Wall Street. And they said, well, why don't you sell, computers with us? And so I said, well, I don't know anything about computers. And so, again, along that theme of once you're headed in a direction, you see an opportunity that presents itself and you say, hey, I think I can do that. Sometimes you have to jump at it. So I said, okay, so these guys offered me a job selling computer systems. And they said, we'll train you and we'll show you what we're doing. And make a long story short, I shifted my college education to nighttime. I started working for this computer firm full time during the day. And 3 years later, that computer company started a telecom division. And that telecom division grew so fast that they didn't have the money to buy the products to fill the orders.
Right.
So I went, oh, this is a really, really great opportunity for business. So it was, another stage after that I thought, I think I could compete in this business. And so I started my telecom business in 92. And that's what I did was I was brokering secondary market used telephone equipment parts.
Right. And let's put this into context. 1992, in the computer business, we haven't even got Windows 95 yet, right? So computers are still, they're not really mainstream, are they? And telecoms is still, it's not really the big growth market that it is today. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry globally. But back then, it still, may have been a risky thing for somebody to get into, right?
Yeah, I think so. We were brokering equipment, and it was all AT&T equipment, and we were just looking at how could we buy equipment. It was all used, right? It was all used equipment. So how do we buy equipment cheaper? How do we figure out ways to refurbish it and make it available for sale? And how do I find spares so that I can offer my customers a warranty on what I do sell them? And so, yeah, I traveled the globe looking for equipment. I ended up buying equipment out of Hong Kong and Bangkok and bringing it back into the U.S. and refurbishing it and selling it. And it was a really great run. We had a lot of fun. But that company evolved over time.
Well, let's talk about the journey. You grew that business to $26 million in revenue, and you had 60 people on the payroll. I'm curious to know how much of your experience as a car wash and car decal guy came into play when you were growing that business at Delecom Systems?
Well, I think I think very little in terms of volume, but in terms of quality, there were a couple of things that really came through. Number one, you have to listen to your customers and treat your customers well. And they will tell you, if you listen to your customer base well enough, they will tell you what business you need to be in, which I thought was wonderful. And number two, you have to work hard, and there's just no excuse for it. For me, there was no easy way. There was no shortcut. You just have to put in the hours. You have to work hard. So I think, the ability to work hard and really buckle down and the ability to listen to my customers and understand what they wanted, that really shaped my company, whether it was auto detailing and then graduating into, the telecom business. So, and that's why my telecom business morphed so much. So it looked completely different when I sold it than it did when I started it.
When you say it morphed, it evolved, was that because you were talking to customers and you were getting insight and ideas from them?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. When I started off in the early days, it was just parts and equipment. And then gradually my customers said, boy, if you had a technician that could come out and install us and help us with this, or if you had someone who could help us program the system, that would be terrific because the manufacturer just kills us with the expenses. And I thought, okay, let's listen. Let's figure out a way that I can get a technician to do that for them. So, I started hiring technicians to do that for my customers.
Right. Now, I'm curious about that because I see a lot of entrepreneurs and CEOs have this problem where they build a business and they sort of move up the ivory tower. They become more and more divorced from that front line, that personal contact with the customer. You had 60 people in your company, which is a reasonably sized company. How did you ensure that you were always out there talking to people when you weren't sort of in the corner office or, you had the high back chair, that kind of environment culture?
Oof, that's a good question. So first of all, I would say that you have to, one of the key things that I did, and I always coach people to do this. In fact, I've just picked up a new client, which we can talk about a little bit later. And I said, have you written down the values? So it's pretty clear what you do and how your business serves its clients. have you taken the time to write down the values of how you want your customers treated, how you want your employees treated, how you want to do business, how do you want to be known, what is the reputation that you want your company to have? And I took the time to write all of that down. So I surrounded myself with a good management team and hired good people, and I enabled them to go and hire other people that fit in with the values of the business.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. Always remember your values. Did you physically write these down when you were running Daycom systems? Did you make a note of them somewhere? How did you remind yourself?
Oh, sure did. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wrote them down, and then we had a discussion when we were a very small company at maybe 17 or 18 people. And I said, guys, here's how I want to do business. And this is the way I want our reputation to be known in the market. And what do you guys think about this? And so we all got together, and we sort of really, because it was a small group of 17 or 18 of us, we sort of really nailed that down as, yeah, this feels right. This is the way we are. This is the way we operate. And it was very much a family at that stage. But when you start having managers that are hiring for you, and you're not really having that direct contact with people, how do you bring the right people into your business?
Right. That's a really important question.
Oh, man. So, and then what I would do is, when you've got 6 or 8 managers reporting to you, you're not doing the direct hire for a new salesperson or for a new technician or a new person in accounting, right? So you count on your managers to do that hiring. But what I would do with every single person that came into the business was I would have that person come in and sit down with me. And I would say, you've been hired by your manager, and I respect your manager and their ability to select a great person. So I'm assuming that you're great at what you do. I want you to understand the way we work, the values that we work with here at this company. And if you ever run into a problem where maybe you're doing a great job, but you don't feel like you're fitting right in the organization, I want you to go back to these values and let's look at that to see if you're in alignment with the way we want to do business.
Right. So, Rick, what you're talking about is the shift between being a founder and a CEO, right? The CEO is somebody who ultimately is the communicator, the main communicator of the culture of the organization and the values of the organization. And it's a task and a role which many CEOs aren't able to do because they're still in founder mode, aren't they? They're still thinking about the product and, we're a team of 2 or 3 guys, but they could be departments of these guys, right? So it's an interesting shift, and that seems to be a core part of what you do in your coaching as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think most CEOs, the biggest problem is they keep most of the stuff in their head. And how I operate and they try to lead by example, which is wonderful when you have 6 or 8 people. When you have 60 people, you can't lead by example because not enough people see you every day. So you've got to document what you do and document the way you think and document the way you feel. And then you communicate that out to the whole team.
Great advice. There's this moment when you sold the business, Rick. I want to talk about that. And, you have worked for 17 years building this business, right? And, that's a very long time. And suddenly, you're no longer the owner of this business. There's a period where you transition out of the business and you pick up the check. But before we talk about that, I think it's really important to context all of this with your background. So as people understand, they look at you, here's a successful guy. He's made good money out of building a business. But before you got there, you didn't get born with a lot of privilege. You didn't have a family which, put you through Harvard Business School. And as you say so yourself, this was hard for you to talk about it publicly, but your family went on welfare, right? At 10th grade, at age 15. Share with us what the story was there and how that sort of shaped you in your future life as an entrepreneur.
Well, yeah, it is difficult, and I think without the help of our friend Monica, who I told you about earlier, I probably never would have discussed it. But she thought it was remarkable. Look, I was raised with, I went to public schools, and I had a mother at home, and my dad worked in a factory, and I had a younger brother and sister, and so one phrase that we used to hear a lot when I was growing up was, "We can't afford that." We can't afford that, and so I got used to the idea there were a lot of things in the world that we couldn't afford. But, we had a good family and it was great and we dreamed a lot. I don't think my father purchased a house until I was probably in maybe fourth or fifth grade. So I was 9 or 10 years old with a younger brother and sister in tow. And I don't even remember us having a new car until probably I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. And so it wasn't a poor upbringing, but it certainly was not a wealthy one. And I knew nothing was going to be handed to me. And then my father came to me at the end of ninth grade, when I was in ninth grade, 2 weeks before the end, and he said, "I'm divorcing your mother. I'm moving back to California, and I'm leaving." And I went, "Wow, okay, this is big. What do I do? I mean, he's the breadwinner. How do I now? What? I'm 14 years old." And so I stuck around with my mother, basically to help her raise my brother and sister. And my mother went back to college full time to get her degree. And we went on welfare. So here I am, a 15-year-old boy who's been used to an okay upbringing. I mean, we did okay. I certainly didn't complain. But now I'm at the back of the lunch line in school with a little lunch ticket. And I'm one of those poor kids that, oh, well, his parents got divorced and there's no money. And that was 10th grade. And if you're a 15-year-old boy growing up, these are tough years for teen boys, right? You probably remember it yourself.
For sure.
Right. So to stand there at the back of the lunch line and get my lunch ticket punched because my family didn't have enough money for me to throw down 50 cents for lunch at the public school, I just knew that I was never going to allow that to happen to me again.
Right. Do those feelings stay with you throughout your journey when you're doing the car wash? Do you think that influenced you to go and start a car wash rather than go to Wall Street? Do you think that influenced you to start Daycom Systems? Is there some kind of, through story there that's sort of driving you and becoming an entrepreneur?
I think so. I think it was what it really did for me, and this is maybe a little bit painful for people to think about, was I began to realize that I didn't have a safety net.
Right.
I had nobody there that was going to offer me a job or that was going to give me guidance on how to become successful. I knew I knew that I just didn't have anybody to fall back on. I knew if anything was going to happen in my life, I had to do it.
Well, that's interesting. But you picked yourself up, and from that age, even though you were the kid at the back of the lunch line with the tickets, you exited. You had a business success. You sold the business, $10 million. Tell us about the feeling when you exited that business.
That's. I have to say that first of all, I don't really think that I was especially bright in school. I mean, I made good grades, but I worked hard. I think, Graham, that I knew that I could work hard, and I knew that I could treat people the right way. And that's kind of been a recurring theme through my life to, sort of, I've had my share of mistakes, certainly. But so we moved on, we sold Daycom. And it was one of those situations where I could see that the market was changing. And the business had become less fun for me. We had 60 people. The manufacturer was quite heavy-handed in trying to influence the way we ran the business. And I just said, maybe it's time for me to exit this business. And luckily, I ended up selling at the right time. I found a company that was a larger company than me by about tenfold. And they didn't have a West Coast presence in the U.S. And so I said, hey, I'm for sale. And I hired a business broker and put together a board of directors. And so I went through a bunch of steps to get the company ready for sale. But I think the feeling when I sold the company was, wow, that was quite an accomplishment. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's next. And I remember a good friend of mine asking me, what are you proudest of? That when you sold the business, what was the thing that you were the most proud of? And I had to say it was watching the people around me grow. Watching people come in. Like one of my best buddies in the world came in to the business as a receiving clerk, and he had been in the Navy, and he just signed on with me as a receiving clerk. But he was another one of those people who really worked hard, and he worked with integrity, and he worked with me for 15 years side by side, and ended up becoming my chief operating officer and having a piece of equity of the company. So I was really proudest of watching all the people around me grow and develop.
Right. And in a way, they were kind of like your own family as well. You've been with them for so long and you've grown these people up. Was it then hard after 17 years to leave a business? What sort of feelings were going through your head? I know you said you were proud of your accomplishments, but suddenly now you're in a situation where you have to leave this behind.
Yeah, sure. So I kept in touch with them, obviously, for a couple of years during the transition. And several, I would say probably 10 to 15% of the people that were there at the company, I'm still in touch with today. We're still friends today. I think that, looking back, but how did I feel at the time? I guess I was sort of, I was proud. I was thankful to be surrounded by such great people. But then I was also a little bit nervous. I mean, I was 45 years old. So now what? Where do I go? And what am I going to do? And so I went from being CEO. I also happened to go through a divorce the same year. So I went from being CEO of a 60-person company with 22 million in revenue to, and a father at home with a couple kids and head of household to here's a guy living in an apartment and he's no longer a CEO. So I really had to rebuild since then.
But building is what you do very well, right? And this is the interesting part about your story is that I think you've got a real passion for taking something on from the very get-go, the beginning, and something from zero and building it up, right? It seems to be something that really drives you.
Yeah, it really is fun. To me, it's not so much about the money, but it's about building something. It's about seeing an opportunity. It's about solving a problem. It's about helping someone make somebody's life better, whether it's in business or personal, and then building something there. And if you do it right, you treat people well, you get paid.
Right. Let's talk about what you're doing now, Rick. What keeps you busy? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Because, you've built a successful business. You've cashed out of that business. You've had a very successful career. Some people might just say, well, okay, let's just cruise control now for the remaining years until I retire. That doesn't seem to be of interest to you. How do you keep yourself busy?
Well, so thanks. No, one of the things that came up was a fellow that I bought a sailboat. So I bought this 40-foot, sailboat just before I sold my company, and I became friends with the vice president of sales for the company that sold me the boat. And we got to know each other over a couple of years, and I sold Daycom, the company, and I was in Mexico on vacation and taking some time off. I mean, I had worked for 17 years, built a company. I decided I was going to take a year off and travel and party and have a great time. And I was now a newly single guy, so that all seemed to be working well. And he called me and he said, my company just went out of business. And I went, I'm really sorry to hear that. Why are you calling me? And this was 2009. And so we had the financial crash, sort of the global financial crash, if you will, in '08. I had sold my business and finished up the sale, and his boating business went out of business. And so he called me and said, hey, we were part of a much larger organization, but I'm good friends with the manufacturer, and they've asked me to find a business partner. And if you would be willing to finance the startup of my business, then I would love to have you as my business partner. And I went, okay, let's look at that. And it just looked like a good opportunity. And I knew he was a great guy, and I knew it was a great brand. And so now I'm in the boating business in San Diego. It's been 6 years. We're up to 17 people, I guess. And it's profitable and growing every year. And it's a lot of fun. But I guess, Graham, what I would say was after I sold Daycom and I was 100% owner and 100% CEO, everything fell on my shoulders. And I just decided after that I wanted to go and reach out and invest money in different places and be able to coach and help other entrepreneurs by sharing my experience, sharing my mistakes, sharing my funding, if that was what was needed. And so I got involved in several businesses, and the boat business is one of those.
What do you enjoy about coaching entrepreneurs? What is it that really drives you? Because you could do this yourself, right? I mean, you could start these businesses yourself. Why then coach somebody else?
Well, I guess it's a way of giving back a little bit. It's a way that when I look at my entrepreneurial upbringing and I look at all the mistakes that I made along the way of building Daycom and from hiring the wrong people to trusting people too much to being sued to all the types of things that cost me a lot of money and they were really tough lessons. I thought, man, I really wish I had a mentor, an entrepreneurial mentor who could help me. And so I've just tried to make myself available to a few key people that like the input, that need the input, that want to build something, and that recognize that that I have something to offer.
I think you'd make a great mentor. I mean, from my own personal experience, I mean, when we grew our telecoms business, I looked around for mentors and I couldn't find the right ones. I found what were the CEOs of large organizations who were, I would say, professional CEOs, people who weren't entrepreneurs, but had been imported as a CEO. Maybe they were once the CFO or, they got their MBA and then moved up the ranks of the organization. They didn't know about growing businesses. Or people who were sort of on the coaching side, but I know you've had a swipe at this as well, at looking at your writings as well. People who are successful business coaches offering business advice. Their only successful business ever was coaching, right? They never grown a business themselves. So, if I was to rewind my business history 15 years, you would have been the perfect business coach for me. Right? Because, that's the kind of guy that I would have liked to listen to and learn from. So I'm curious to know what kind of lessons you impart and what kind of common mistakes you find entrepreneurs making today and, how you advise them.
Yeah, well, thanks for your vote of confidence anyway. It's like we were talking a little bit earlier before the show. I think that most people get into a business because they know how to do something. They know how to perform a service. They know how to. In my business partner's case, he knew how to sell boats. He was passionate about the brand. He knew the customers, and there's nobody better in the business at doing what he does. But it's everything else in the business that it takes to support that effort, right? It's the insurance, the licenses, the startup capital, the financial management, the personnel management, the organizational structure, the employee handbook, the values. It's all of the stuff that goes into managing the people and growing an organization in a rational way that it makes sense and that you're not spending all of your time trying to handle all of the details of the business. If to me, a really successful CEO can start a business because they know how to do something and then hire people into their business that are experts in all of the areas that they are not. And then you've got something. So is there a common theme with CEOs that I see? It's that they keep too much in their head and they try to do everything themselves and they try to touch everything themselves versus taking what's in their head and publishing it throughout the organization saying, this is the way we will do business and I will enable you to become an expert.
Oh, isn't that insightful? Do you see your role really as kind of also protecting the CEO's time? Because I imagine that, one thing you're doing there is trying to get them to focus, isn't it? Maybe they might be a bit of, well, let's put it, let's call a spade a spade. It's like, the CEOs are control freaks usually, right? We are by nature wanting to do everything because we know best and we can do best. And how do you deal with that? Because, I'm sure a lot of CEOs think, well, it's easier if I just do it myself rather than train this guy to do it, right?
Yeah, that's a common problem. And the problem with that is that there's just one you. There's only one you. And so you have to be able to let go. And I've written a couple of blog posts about, number one, how to delegate and what the mechanical or tactical steps are in delegating. But beyond that, the emotional side, I call it the dark side of delegation, which is the trusting and the letting go of the control and the idea that if I give Graham, the operations department, is he going to do it the way I would do it? And so it's one thing to know how to delegate. It's another thing to really have the guts to let go and to have faith in the people that you've hired, the systems that you've put in place, the compensation programs that you've put in place. That's a common problem with people, and I think it's a big step to just sort of let go and make sure you've set the thing up correctly.
But that's why we need mentors, isn't it? Because it's the mentor who can give us that confidence, that sort of second opinion, that they know that they're looking out for us rather than I sometimes find that role as a CEO a lonely role, right? Often you don't have people to talk to because you can't talk to your employees because sometimes you don't want to tell them the truth. Well, you can't tell them all the information about what's going on in the business. And sometimes you can't talk to, some of your business partners because, well, for whatever reason, but sometimes I find that role is sometimes you're on your own, right? Even though everybody knows you.
Oh, I think you I think you're just blatantly on your own because you're absolutely right. Everybody else has a motivation in the business. So even your closest advisors, you know, inside the business and the people that you think are your closest friends, you've got to be careful of the advice that they give you because they have a selfish interest. And that's why, for example, at Daycom, I put together an outside board of directors. And I just hired these guys with the idea that I wanted to sell the business. And I knew that I didn't know how to sell the business. And I hired them for that specific purpose. But absolutely. And that's another reason that after I sold Daycom and I was 100% CEO, I decided to become that investor, that advisor, that business partner where I could help people. But, you know, my business partner at the yacht business knows, I hope he knows, that my interest is in seeing him build a successful business, but also enjoy his time with his family and not kill himself along the way. And when he gets worried, I encourage him. And when things are going well, I say, okay, you know, keep a lid on it. Let's not get too excited, you know. So I've enjoyed that role of helping other people because I really didn't have that along the way.
Right, you've got his back there, right?
Sure.
What would you advise a younger Rick? You know, if you were to somehow magically go back and speak to the young Rick when he's, you know, looking at his first car wash job, his franchise, taking on the decal work. And what I really want to ask is, what do you know now that you didn't know back then?
Well, I would say that the one thing I would say to the younger Rick today is everything's going to be okay. And I just didn't know that. You tend to spend so much time, especially in the early stages, worrying and wondering and guessing if you're doing the right thing, but especially the fear part and, well, what if this bad thing happens? And then maybe this next bad thing might happen. And then this next bad thing might happen. And you find yourself really demoralized. And what I found is that if you are dedicated, if you know what your business is and you know who your customers are and you're not afraid to work hard, then you're going to be fine. And seek out that expertise. Seek out people who know more than you do in any specific area, because that's where you're going to get the help. And most people, when you ask them for help, they're glad to help. They're happy to help.
For sure, just reach out. I think as well, it's interesting to note that let's talk about your yacht. I mean, okay, we talked about this off air. You christened your yacht.
Yeah.
What did you call it?
So the name of the boat is Audacious.
Audacious, right? And there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, well, and it goes back again, you know, a lot of things I think that we're inspired by go back to our childhood. But I remember my mother when I was feeling particularly confident that I had done something well, whether it was baseball or school, or maybe I've gotten a girl to say, yes, I'll go to the dance with you, you know, whatever it was. She'd say, you know, you've got a lot of audacity, young man. And so it was her way of trying to knock me down a little bit. But I thought, you know, it's okay to be proud. It's okay to be confident. And so I just chose Audacious because we race quite a bit. And you know, I like to take chances, and I like people to know that you know, we'll take a risk. We may be wrong. We may make a mistake, but, you know, doggone it, we're out there, we're trying hard, and sometimes we're going to win.
Right. And to those old friends, quote unquote, that you sort of shared a bit of time with way back, and they didn't believe that you were going to do this, didn't believe that you were going to make a success of it, and thought you should go and get a proper job. Have you ever invited them for sundowners on the yacht?
No, I think I've you know, it's been so many years, Graham. You know, it's been 25 years now since I since I started the detailing business. But I was in touch actually just recently, like the last year, with the guy Larry that I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, who taught me about the auto detailing business, and he said, "My friend, your star has shot very high and very bright," and
Fantastic.
I couldn't have been prouder. He was just a great guy, and he was a great inspiration for me.
Well, Rick, you're an inspiration for all of us, myself, the listeners. I've really enjoyed having you on the show and learning more about your story. That's Rick Day, everybody, entrepreneur, investor, mentor. Rick, where do we find out more about you?
Well, so I've got my business coaching website. It's businessbyday.com. My last name is Day, like day of the week. And I just have room for a few select clients. I'm coaching 4 different companies right now. But I'm very busy in the boat business and the financing business and the salon franchises that we're building. And so I like to coach just 3 or 4 clients at a time. And hopefully there are people where I can add some good value and people who will take advice and have the guts to make changes. And hopefully they listen and realize that I can help them.
Yeah, for sure. Fantastic. Rick, it's been a real pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your journey with us. As I said, a real inspiration. That's Rick Day, everybody. Businessbyday.com. We'll put the details in the show notes. Rick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham.
Founder FM, voice of the entrepreneur. Find out more at www.founderfm.com.